Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a genuinely fascinating historical, theological, and linguistic mystery hidden right inside one of the most studied texts in human history, the Quran. Specifically, we're taking a closer look at the famous concept of the 99 names of God. Now, if you grew up around this tradition, or honestly, even if you've just seen the beautiful calligraphy hanging on a wall somewhere, you've likely heard of these names. But what if I told you that there is a massive, glaring omission in the most famous historical lists of these names? An omission so huge, it actually completely changes how we understand the text's core message.
Okay, to really wrap our heads around the scale of this mystery, we've got to look at one specific, incredibly important number, 962. Within the source text, there's a specific divine attribute, a name, that is mentioned exactly 962 times. That incredible frequency makes it the second most used name for God in the entire book, second only to the name Allah itself. It's practically a cornerstone of the text's theology.
So that brings us to the core question here. The name we're talking about is Rab, which is traditionally translated as Lord, Sustainer, or Nurturer. Despite popping up 962 times, the name Rab is completely absent from the two most famous traditional 99 name lists compiled by classical scholars Tirmizi and Ibn Maseh. Think about that for a second. How on earth could the second most prominent name be totally left out, especially when you realize those traditional lists actually include 26 names that don't even appear in the original text at all?
Part 1. By the numbers, the prominence of Rab.
Just think about the sheer volume for a moment. The name Allah is used 2,697 times, but Rab comes in as a really strong second, with 962 occurrences. Our source analysis points out that the statistical dominance of Rab essentially proves that its absence from those famous 99 name lists means those lists were later human additions. They aren't a definitive, original reflection of the text itself. The text is practically screaming the importance of this specific name. And it's not just about how many times it's used, it's about where it's used. Rub is the very first attribute mentioned in the very first chronological revelation. Read in the name of your Rub. And if you look at the compiled text, the very last word of the very last chapter is also Rub. It perfectly frames the entire message. The source suggests that this frames the whole text not just as a rulebook, but as a journey of divine education. So what does this word actually mean in practice? Well, we have to define Rububiyet, which is the state of being a Rab. Our source material emphasizes that this isn't just some static title, like a king sitting far away on a throne. It's an active, ongoing process of divine nurturing, sustaining, and bringing things to their ultimate purpose. The text implies that the very reason revelation exists is because of this nurturing quality. It's the ultimate educational tool from a sustainer to its creation.
Part 2. The grammar of intimacy, a personal connection.
Now here is where it gets really fascinating. There's this brilliant linguistic quirk regarding how this word is actually used in the text. This is where the grammar reveals a profound psychological and spiritual layer. In Arabic, you usually put the definite article al, meaning the, in front of a title. But the word rub is never used with a generic the in the entire text. It never says the rub. Instead, it appears hundreds of times in a possessive, deeply intimate form. Over 240 times it's Rabuk, or your Lord, and 178 times it's Rabbi, or Rabuna, meaning my Lord or our Lord. The grammar itself demands a personal relationship. It's asking the reader to internalize this nurturing presence. It's asking the reader to adopt my lordship, the text essentially says, and it will manifest within you.
And this perfectly illustrates that level of intimacy. Just consider the contrast for a second. The phrase, O Lord, or Ya Rab, uses a prefix of calling out, almost like you're shouting across a crowded room. This phrase is only used twice in all 962 occurrences, and both times it's used to express deep complaint and sorrow about the afterlife. Why? Because the source notes that saying O implies distance or distraction. You yell O to someone far away or someone who is asleep. But the text insists the Creator is closer than your own jugular vein, always awake and deeply near. Hence, my Lord, 178 times.
Part 3. The conflict over lordship, stewardship versus ownership.
So what actually happens when humanity decides to reject this intimate connection? Historically, classical civilizations from Andalusia to Baghdad to Samarkand treated scientific discovery as uncovering the art of the Rab. Knowledge was a sacred trust, an ime. You respected the sustainer of the materials you were studying, but when you remove the sustainer from the equation, you replace stewardship with ownership. Knowledge simply becomes property.
Because when humanity views knowledge purely as owned property,
unchecked by any higher accountability to a nurturer, well, the consequences are pretty terrifying. The source points out that this mindset makes it incredibly easy to justify creating weapons of mass destruction. You suddenly feel entitled to engineer bugs that wipe out entire forests, or to weaponize microscopic pathogens just to destroy your enemies. Because you view yourself as the absolute owner, the rub of the material, you completely lose the moral guardrails of stewardship.
Part 4. Masterpieces of Divine Design, the Micro and the Macro.
To really see how this sustainer concept actually guides the physical world around us, let's look at something tiny, something kind of annoying actually, a mosquito. The source notes that God is not ashamed to use a mosquito as a profound example. And when you look at its biology, it's a microscopic masterpiece. A mosquito is equipped with 4 sensory laboratories analyzing heat, tone, movement, and light. It has over 100 eyes, arranged like a honeycomb, an intricate mouth with 48 teeth acting like tiny surgical scalpels, and 3 hearts, 1 main heart, and 2 specifically dedicated just to powering its wings.
And its feeding process? It is literally an unbelievably complex surgical strike. Before it even cuts into you, it injects a local anesthesia, which, by the way, is exactly why you don't feel it until it's already done and laughing at you from the ceiling. It then secretes an anticoagulant to stop your body's natural defense system from clotting the blood. Finally, it sucks up to 8 times its own body weight in blood without bursting. For a human, that would be the equivalent of chugging 200 liters of water.
And to power this incredible biological machine, those wings, driven by their own dedicated hearts, remember, flap at a staggering 500 times per second. The source highlights this sheer mechanical power by noting a simple, crazy comparison. If human joints were forced to flap our arms 500 times a second, the sheer force would snap our arms off completely. It is divine design engineered at the absolute smallest possible scale. All right, let's zoom all the way out from the micro to the macro scale. The source compares the energy that powers the Earth, carbonic fire, or fossil fuels, with the energy that powers the sun, which is nuclear fusion. This highlights the sustainer's absolute mastery on a cosmic scale, giving entirely different creations vastly different physical laws to achieve their unique purpose. To really grasp the scale of the sun's design, think about this for a second. If the sun were a massive ball of fossil fuels, if it burned with the same carbonic fire we use right here on Earth, the source points out it would have burned itself out in 1/3 billionth of its current lifespan. Instead, it has burned for billions of years without shrinking, precisely because it was given a unique physical law, nuclear fusion, by its rub, specifically engineered to sustain life on our planet.
Part 5. The ultimate nurturer. Purpose and guidance.
So bringing it all together, what does it fundamentally mean to be the rub of a mosquito, the sun, and humanity? The most profound definition actually comes from a legendary dialogue in the text between Moses and Pharaoh. When Pharaoh asks, "Who is your Lord?" Moses replies with this incredible quote, "Our Lord is he who gave each thing its form and nature, then guided it." That is the essence of the rub. It's the entity that embeds a specific purpose, a chilka, into every single creation, equips it with the exact tools it needs, whether that's a mosquito's 48 teeth or the sun's nuclear fusion, and then actively guides it to fulfillment.
For us as humans, this macro guidance often translates into what we experience in our daily lives as trials. Just like a mother disciplines a child out of love, or a doctor performs a painful surgery to heal a patient, the divine nurturer uses both blessings and hardships to shape us. The source uses a brilliant modern analogy here. Think of Olympic athletes. We applaud them for enduring 10 to 12 hours a day of agonizing, grueling training, completely breaking their bodies down just for a worldly medal. Divine trials, the text argues, are exactly that kind of intense training, but for an eternal spiritual medal. Which leaves us with this final, profound thought. If every atom, every insect, and every star is intricately designed and sustained for a specific purpose, then so are you. The whole concept of the rub is asking us to completely reframe our worldview. So I leave you with this. How will you perceive the trials, the disciplines, and the blessings that are actively nurturing your ultimate purpose today? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and as always, keep questioning and keep learning.